yourself a cold one.
They strike 'em, huh?
And listen to Ross Tucker break down the top college prospects on another tasty edition of The College Draft.
Yeah, it's Daddy Soda time here on the College Draft Podcast, presented, of course, as always, by DraftKings. Thank goodness for those dudes. Make sure you use the code Ross if you're playing best ball on the DK app, or, of course, get those little bonuses they give you on the DK Sportsbook app. I am Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman. I think most of you know that, but hopefully we get a couple new listeners or people checking us out, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL every episode. Former offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. Thank goodness, because it enabled me to get all these broadcasting gigs. It was awesome to do the Eagles' first preseason game on Friday night. I'll be back at it again Thursday night as they take on the Patriots up in Foxborough, home of the Pats. You can check me out on social at Ross Tucker NFL. Check us out, of course, at Ross Tucker Pod. Emory has the day off because of travel and training camps and all of that stuff. Very excited for today's guest, a guy that I've seen his rise in the media from afar. To my knowledge, I've never met him, but I definitely have read some of his stuff and check out his social media at times, which you should do, by the way, at Tampa Bay Trey. I'm talking about Trevor Sikkema, the lead NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus, who's going to give us a big overview of especially the top guys in the draft class in general before we get into college football. Really looking forward to calling some big-time games this year for CBS. Should be a blast. Trevor, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. How are you?
Ross, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me. It makes sense that I'm filling in for Emory, who is the busiest man in all of sports, it feels like. Anytime I get to the draft season and I get to see Emory at, the Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, the Combine, he's everywhere, man. So it makes sense that even right now, the reason why I get to come on this show, which I'm very excited about, is because Emory's out there working, man. It's just what he does.
Well, and a lot of people go to those 3 events you just named. It's all the other events he goes to that I've never heard of. That he goes to like some Canadian college all-star game, which is before the season. It's really unbelievable. I don't know. I haven't asked him. I don't know what his travel budget is or who's paying it or how he funds it, but it is super impressive. It's a big reason why his draft guide is so successful. So I've read about this, Trevor, but for the listeners to this show that may not be as familiar, where'd you come from? How'd you get this gig, and how'd you kind of grow to the point where you're at now?
Yeah, so I'm from just south of Tampa, Florida, born and raised, Bradenton, Florida. Some people might know that because IMG is down there now, which has kind of made Bradenton world famous. But born and raised in Bradenton, Florida, grew up a big Tampa sports fan, and so, followed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers my entire life. Ended up going to the University of Florida to get my broadcasting degree, and then after that, came back to the Tampa area, did a couple of freelance jobs for a little bit, but then ended up landing on my feet full-time working for pewterreport.com as a beat reporter. Got to cover that team for a couple of years, which was a dream to be for that to be my first full-time job, getting to cover the team that I grew up watching. So did that for a handful of years, absolutely loved it. Started the Draft Network with a couple of buddies of mine because we absolutely loved the NFL draft. And then after spending a couple of years with TDN, PFF came calling. I ended up going over there to do a lot of hosting stuff for them. And since then, I've sort of been able to get into a lot of different avenues, which I've loved. I'm into podcasting now. I do a lot of on-camera stuff for them, but mainly right now, I'm their lead NFL draft analyst, which is something that I've just always loved throughout my entire football career. It's funny, people go, hey, how'd you get it? Why are you so into the draft? Why do you love the draft so much? And I'm like, well, I was a Bucs fan post-2002 Super Bowl era, and they weren't very good. So basically, the only thing that we had to care about was the team trying to get better in the offseason in the NFL draft, and I've been able to parlay that into a career here, which has been a lot of fun for me.
Dude, I got 3 Buck stories from playing against them. You want to hear them?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Okay, so it's 2002,
Okay.
and it's a preseason game. And, but our coach, I'm starting at right guard for the Washington Redskins. It's my second year. I was undrafted free agent the year before, but I'm starting at right guard against the Bucs. And this is the second preseason game for us, third for us, second for them. So back then, dude, like the starters would play the whole first half. Like that was the deal, right? So I'm going up against Warren Sapp, Chartrick Darby. I want to say that maybe Booger was hurt. Booger was always hurt. Hopefully he sees this. So a couple things I remember. Our coach was Spurrier, Trevor. So you're a Florida guy. This is why I'm telling you this.
Yes.
I don't know if it was sold out, but it was jam-packed. I mean, it was a preseason game because I remember my parents got tickets through the Redskins like up in nosebleed, and I went out there. That stadium's sweet, by the way, and I'm looking around, and I'm like, I thought it was sold out. And in my head, it was like the first year of the new stadium, but it wasn't. But at any rate, there was that much. It was the crossover between Spurrier and Florida coming back to that area.
Yeah.
Where it was a really big deal. So a couple things that jump out about the game. One is I'm doing pretty well. You know, in the first quarter, I'm blocking Sapp or whoever. Something happens at the end of a play where I guess Stephen Davis, who had led the NFC in rushing in 2001,
right,
felt like Sapp gave him a little bit too much at the end of the play in the pile. So they start jawing at each other, right? Dude, Trevor, the next play, Sapp came off so hard, all right? It was like he lifted me up off the ground, all right? And you know, he didn't make the tackle, but like I was like, oh, crap. He took it to another level, okay? He and Stephen Davis are still jawing after the play. Next play, it's like third and long maybe, or second and long. And he's wide, almost like a 4-eye, but like a wide in the B gap, right? He comes flying off the ball and gets on my edge and ends up hitting the quarterback. I think it was Shane Matthews. And as he walks back to the line of scrimmage, walks past me without even looking at me. He just says, "You can't block me, son." And I get back in the huddle and I'm like, "Steven, you need to shut the bleep up." I'm like, Trevor, I'm trying to win a starting job, and it was going well until he got Sapp all right. I'm like, Steven, shut up, dude. Like, you're already rich. You know, like, let me, I was doing fine until this. So I'll never forget that. Stephen Davis almost screwing me out of a starting job by lighting Warren Sapp's fire during a preseason. And then somehow we scored a touchdown or whatever. And I'm the tight end or wing on the field goal team. And John Lynch is playing safety for them.
Yeah.
And right. I almost want to go back and look up how it happened, but he comes to my outside and I like hook him almost like, you know, like you're doing like flies, like dumbbell flies.
Yeah.
I hook him and I don't know if he was off balance or what, but I pulled him through like this. John Lynch went flying and fell on his butt from me. Like somebody has to have that somewhere, right? Like, and it was awesome. Like, and he got up laughing, and I had no idea how that had happened. So it's funny, like, dude, I could tell you one other play the whole game. I remember nothing else from the game. It's like you remember stories, not the actual plays. So anyway, you talking Bucks just got me. Like those are the Bucks things that jump out to me. Awesome stadium, by the way.
People forget how good Warren Sapp was. Like, obviously just like play to play, he's a Hall of Famer, everything. But like you said, when people pissed Warren Sapp off and he was like, oh, okay, I'll go 100% now. Like, I watched the plays growing up. I've gone back to watch the highlight film. I'm like, this is nuts. Like, this is crazy how fast and explosive he was moving at his size. It was, yeah, he was. People who don't fully appreciate that story or Warren Sapp need to go back and watch the highlights, and then I think that story will get even better for them.
Unbelievable how much force and energy. You know how like I don't have one, but I know people. You know, like a Tesla. Don't they go from like 0 to 60 in like 2 seconds?
I test drove one for the first time like 6 months ago. It's crazy.
That's what I hear.
It literally is a completely different type of car. You hit the gas and it's just like boom, and it just that's a very good analogy.
I can was Sapp out of his stance. Like, you're not supposed to be able to generate that much force, that much energy from like a standstill. By the way, we have still yet to talk about any of the prospects in the draft. This is what my shows used to be like when they were longer. I do need to tell everybody, though, that Labatt Blue Light is delicious. If you want to take things to the next level, drink some Labatt Blue Lights with your friends. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. Okay. Tell me, Trevor, about the class overall.
Yeah.
Strength, where is it strong? Where is it not as strong? How does it compare to the last couple of classes? We'll get into the quarterbacks, but just kind of overall.
Sure. Yeah, so disclaimer, I haven't gotten to safeties yet, which I've heard there's a couple of really good ones in this class as well. So the safety class also might be pretty strong, but that's the last position group that we're kind of getting to as we're closing out our summer scouting series. But running back, man, it's a good year to need a running back. I mean, the guys that are potential to come into this class, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Ollie Gordon, Omarion Hampton, like Ashton Ginty, like all of those guys I just named are top 50 caliber guys. Like those are guys that could legitimately be considered for the top 50. Just because the running back class sort of is what it is in the perception of the draft, I don't think it's going to happen, but we could get a lot of those names in that conversation. So it's a good year to need a running back. It's always a good year to need a wide receiver. Wide receiver class is really good. You got two really, really big studs at the top in Luther Burden III from Missouri and Tetero McMillan, who, look, I correctly talked about, like, I have some Tampa roots. So a lot of times when these bigger, taller receivers come out of the draft and people go, he's Mike Evans, I go, no. Calm down. Like, Mike Evans is a rare breed for what he is able to do at his size with his athleticism. Tetero McMillan from Arizona is one of the first guys, if not the first guy over the last 5 or 6 years where I've gone, okay, you can kind of use the Mike Evans comp here. I actually get it. This one actually fits. It's not too big of a stretch. So the wide receiver class I think is really good. Offensive tackle, interior offensive line class, I think is solid. It's not like the offensive tackle class that we just saw come through, or, the Jedrick Willis, Tristan Wirfs, Andrew Thomas here. Like, it's not quite that, but there are a lot of guys to get excited about that I like. Interior defensive line, they got a stud in Mason Graham, who's at the very top from Michigan. I think he could be a potential top 3 pick, maybe even the number 1 overall pick.
Wow.
Edge rusher, I think is pretty good as well. There's not like a Myles Garrett and Nick Bosa, something like that. But yeah, guys like Nick Scourton, who transferred over to Texas A&M from Purdue this year, I think that he's really good. Michael Williams, the edge rusher from Georgia, I think could take a big leap this year. A lot of people like James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher from Tennessee as well. So there's a lot of good guys there. And then from what I've gotten through the cornerback class, I think we're going to be pretty strong in that area too. So I think those are the positions where we're the most strongest. Tight end, a little bit lighter. Interior offensive line might be a little bit lighter. I think linebacker's probably a little bit lighter as well. And then quarterback, like you said, sort of a all over the place combination. There's a lot of names, but is there a guy that's going to end up claiming that number 1 overall pick spot? I think that's to be seen.
Couple thoughts there. One is, I saw how he dominated in the college football playoffs, but I didn't realize Mason Graham was that good. Like, I didn't know he was top 3 pick, maybe number 1. That's That is rarefied air
Yeah.
for a D tackle. He's that good, Trevor?
Yeah, I really I think that he is going to be, obviously I still have to get through the rest of the corners and some of the safety group, but there's a good chance that he's the number one player on my big board going into the season. Again, like he was that dominant in the college football playoff, and I think that's a lot of stuff that you can say we're going to continue to see this from this point on. I mean, the strength is fantastic from him. The hand usage is great already. His ability, you talk about like Warren Sapp. I'm not comping him to Warren Sapp or anything, but you talk about a guy's ability to explode and how quickly he can get across the face of an interior offensive lineman is crazy. Even without handy, like even without like an initial club or an arm over or anything like that. I'm just talking about first, second step, just getting from one gap to the other before the offensive lineman can even like pivot his hips. Like it's just the speed, the flexibility. He's got actual bend for a guy who's like above 300 pounds, which is a little bit crazy as well. So all of that combination there is just working in his favor, to where the fact that we don't have a quarterback or two that we're already talking about as a number one overall pick, I think that opens the door for some of these other premium positions, maybe offensive tackle, maybe some sort of a pass rusher, to be a number one overall guy. And there hasn't been a number one overall defensive tackle since 1994. I can't remember who it was, but 1994, I remember
Big Daddy
the year.
Wilkinson.
I think it might have been. Right.
Dan Big Daddy Wilkinson.
So that was the last year that a true defensive tackle was taken number one overall. So been a minute for sure, but Mason Graham, man, he is that good.
Yeah, I had to go against Big Daddy every day in practice. And
That's
then
right. There you
in
go.
a game, he was very, very physically gifted. Just at tight ends, Trevor, I don't know if you checked him out yet.
Mm-hmm.
A guy I'm a big fan of, and I hope they give him the ball more this year, is Tyler Warren at Penn State.
Yeah.
You should check out his high school video. It's hilarious. He's quarterback, and they run the Wildcat a lot. And then, like, they would get to the red zone, and they would put him at receiver and throw him a fade ball. I mean, and what's so interesting to me about him is, as a guy that was a quarterback, and then they put him at receiver, he'll get after your butt. I mean, he'll block you. Like, he'll get after you. I have no idea why Penn State had two day two tight ends last year and didn't give him the ball very often. Instead, they threw the ball to their receivers, none of whom are probably NFL players. It's probably why they have a new OC, but they had Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren, and they could have both left. Theo did. Tyler Warren stayed. And I'd like to think he'll be the beneficiary of that, but he's a really gifted kid, and he's rugged, which I like.
Yeah, so, I mean, even just kind of comparing him to last year's class, because I have watched him within this group, he is a lot of people like Ben Sennett, the tight end from Kansas State, kind of because he was like this tight end, slot receiver, fullback type of a guy. I think Tyler Warren can be that role, that all-around role that Ben Sennett was. He's just bigger and taller and stronger, and so like he's doing all of those things. And you talked about the physicality, man. I have that in my notes. I'm just looking at it right in front of me. The physical mentality that he brings to the game, teams are absolutely going to love. So I agree with you. A lot of people like Theo Johnson, and I thought that he was fine, but when I was watching some of the flashes of Tyler Warren, I'm like, man, this guy was underutilized last year, and I certainly hope that they give him the ball a lot more as the tight end one this year, because I think he's got a lot more juice to squeeze, if you will, on that talent level for that offense.
I think they will. I think the new OC, Kotelnicki, I think he'll do a good job of that. I'd like to think. Let's hope. Let's talk about the quarterbacks. And right now, how many guys do you think have a legitimate chance to be first-round picks or top 10 picks? I think a lot of us hear the same names. Where are you at with the quarterback class overall, I guess?
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of names to know, and I think that there's a lot of potential in the group. A lot of it just has not been realized yet. And when you start to talk about, okay, well, who are the guys in the class who have the physical gifts to be a number one overall pick type of a quarterback? Like, I think of Quinn Ewers, or like even Conor Wogan, Jalen Milroe. Like, these guys were, when you watch them play, you go, okay, physically, you are an NFL player. You have an NFL level arm. You have NFL level arm talent. all three of those guys still unproven, right? Jalen Milroe, obviously, like he has his inconsistencies that we watched last year. I think that he got better as the year went on. Can that continue to be the case? As Nick Saban said to him, hey, you just have to be the point guard. You don't have to be the leading scorer every single game. Be more of a facilitator. We saw a little bit of that at times, but he still has those inconsistencies to him. Quinn Ewers, sort of, he's all over the place as well. Not in the same way that Milroe is, but the consistencies of which, I think ball placement's the big thing for Ewers. We see that velocity, all the crazy arm angles, like NFL talent and arm strength for days, but the consistency of the ball placement, especially when he's throwing deep down the field, which if you got a big arm, that's going to be kind of what you want to boast, right? Attack down the field, stretch the defense, stretch the secondary, but that consistency still isn't quite there yet for him. And then a guy that I love, who is QB1 for me going into the year, but I understand the criticism of it, Conor Wogan from Texas A&M. I love Conor Wegman's 3.5 games that he played last year, but he only played 3.5 games before he had a leg injury that ended his season. And those 3.5 games, I'll be honest with you, not great competition, right? Not really good competition that he went up against. And I fully understand that once things start to ramp up, can he continue to look as good as he was last year against that good competition? And then you get into some categories like, okay, Carson Beck, right? That's a name that a lot of people talk about as a potential QB1. My question is, does he have legit NFL arm strength to be a number 1 overall pick type of a guy? I think sort of the same with Shedeur Sanders. Sanders, really good fundamentals, tough as nails with his mentality, but does he have an NFL level arm? Because there are times when I'm watching him push the ball deep down the field, especially when he is not on platform, when he cannot set his base appropriately, that ball kind of dies on him in the air. At the NFL level, man, those don't turn into incompletions. Those are interceptions. Those are going the other way. Those are lost possessions. So those are a handful of guys that I think you hear about a lot in that conversation to be a number 1 overall pick. But each of them, there's things to like, and there's things that you definitely still need to see from them this upcoming season for them to really take that title by the horns, if you will.
That is interesting, because I didn't know that, or I hadn't heard that. I kind of thought the Beck thing might just be the lack of athleticism, you know, or second reaction ability, and just kind of a pocket guy. And Sanders, that's interesting that both you have arm strength concerns about both those guys, because neither one of them is. Sanders can do it a little bit more, but neither one of them is a dynamic second reaction,
right,
you know, outside of structure player.
Right. And that's, you know, when I look at them and I see their arm strength, like, I think that that it's adequate for the NFL level, right? I mean, I think that they could be starting quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just when you talk about being a number 1 overall pick, you kind of want to talk about rare traits. Like, you want to talk about a guy who's giving you something that not only is good in that class, but doesn't come around too often. And so for those players, both of those guys, in my opinion, have to be really great anticipators in order for you to kind of maximize their arm strength to where they continue to have success in the NFL level. I will say, we certainly did start to see that with Beck as the year went on. That second half of the season for him, he got a lot more confident in that offense. He was getting to his reads at the right timing. He was a fantastic in-rhythm passer. But you mentioned, not really a escape artist kind of a guy, not really a guy who's going to avoid pressure, get outside of the pocket, and avoid the sack more often than some of these other players are. So if that's the case, what kind of player are you? What kind of arm do you have from the pocket? So those are just little things that I watch from tape. And honestly, for some of these underclassmen, sometimes it can be, you see them take a little bit off the arm because they're not as confident as they could be. When you get more confidence in what you're seeing, sometimes that arm strength looks a little better because it's coming off the wrist a lot more confidently. You're seeing it when you need to. So we'll see if that's the case for them this year.
That's interesting about Conor Wogan, because I have not heard as much about him, probably because of that injury last year. But that says a lot that you feel that strongly about him on 3.5 games. Or was it in part from the year before?
No, it was so he got a little bit of time on the field the year prior, but last year was the first year where we actually saw him prepare as a full-time starter, and we got 3 games from him. I think it was like New Mexico State, Miami, I can't remember who the other game was, and then Auburn was the game that he was playing and he got hurt. So in those 3.5 games, though, for that season bunch, now it's a small sample size. So take that with a grain of salt, and you should, but elite PFF passing grades in a lot of categories, from a clean pocket, when there's like on third down, I think he performed very well, almost an elite passing grade on third and long situations, which I absolutely love. When it comes to attacking over the middle of the field, he had an elite PFF passing grade. So those are two areas that I look for quarterbacks. If you stand out there, it makes me feel like you've got a good feel for your offense, how to attack the defense, and you're not afraid to do that because you got to be able to attack the middle of the field at the NFL level. He's got a former baseball background, so you can see him, launch it from some different arm angles and get creative with how he gets the ball out of his hands, and it's still got good zip and velocity to it. So he brings a lot of natural tools that I love to the table. But I will also be fair in saying that the best defense that he faced was Auburn. And that was that last game in which he got hurt. And that was the game in which he was performing the worst. And I think that probably sounds harsher than it needs to, but that was the best defense. And it's not like he was totally carving them up before he got hurt. So you take everything with a grain of salt, but I do love what I saw from him. I hope we get a player who can really hit the ground running this past season, because I think he's got some good tools to love.
Check him out on social media at Tampa Bay Trey. He's the lead NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Focus. My new guy, Trevor Sikkema. Trevor, really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Ross. Anytime, my friend.
Thanks for tuning in to College Draft. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and Fantasy Feast, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform.